Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Benji-Sales live chat. It's so good to be back. It is so good to see everybody. How are you doing today, everyone? Hope you're doing great. It is freezing cold where I am right now. My house is freezing, but it's so good to see everybody. So what can we talk about today? What are the big industry news and topics we can cover? Well, we've got several. November NPD results just came out earlier this week. There's a whole bunch of data there we're going to dive into and discuss, whether that's hardware, whether that's software, really whatever you want to talk about. I'm going to break down the top 20 software and give you those hardware results here in just a second. Of course, we also just got the announcement this week that a lot of people have been waiting for. That's right, Splinter Cell is back. After all this time, there is a new Splinter Cell game in the works. Now, we don't have a whole lot of info about this, but we know it is a remake. It's a remake of the original Splinter Cell. They've said that it's going to be faithful to the original. It's not a remaster, full-on remake. This is being done on the Snowdrop engine, I believe, if I remember correctly, which is the same engine that powers games like The Division, the upcoming Avatar game, etc. We also just had news this morning that Tencent has acquired Turtle Rock Studios, developer of Back 4 Blood, Evolve, Left 4 Dead. We can talk about that, right? What does this mean as Tencent and NetEase, to a lesser extent, acquire more and more studios and industry consolidation in general? I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of top questions around that. So really quick, let me break down those NPD results for you really quick, and then we are going to start diving into your comments and questions. It's telling me no data. Hopefully you guys can see this. Can you confirm for me in chat if you can see this right now? Right now the stream tells me no data. I just want to know. I want to know if you guys can see me or if my stream's dead. Huh, interesting. I didn't get any alerts like I normally do that the stream's dead. It just said no data. All right, let me know if you guys can see me. Benji with his eternal internet issues. It's just my provider. I've done everything I possibly can in terms of troubleshooting. My provider it's the best provider in the area, and their internet's apparently not stable enough. Okay, everyone says they can see it, so we're fine. Could have just been OBS giving me some weird stuff. Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody. All right, let's really quick dive into these NPD results, and then we're going to get into your comments and questions. Now, in terms of hardware, Switch was the #1 selling platform for the month, as it pretty much always has been for years on end, right? We had that 1 month, which was September, where that streak ended, where PlayStation 5 actually outsold the Switch. But outside of that, for basically 3 years straight, it's been nothing but Switch domination, and that continues. Switch was the #1 selling platform for the month of November. It sold, we actually got some PR for this, so we know how much it sold, 1.13 million units. Now that's down a little bit from last year. I won't go into the exact amount it's down because I don't think that number's public, but maybe it is. But either way, it's down a little bit, but over 1 million in November is still a great result, especially right now with hardware shortages. So I don't consider that a bad result at all in terms of for Nintendo. Down a bit from last year, but like I've been saying on this chat for quite a while now, I expect that last year was Switch's peak year. So for it to decline just a little bit in a huge holiday month, I don't think that's a big deal in a negative way at all. Great result for Switch. Interestingly, Xbox was #2, which if you watched my chat last week, I told you there was a very good chance that that was going to happen through the data that I'd been seeing, through some of the stuff that was floating around in terms of like some metrics from other places. Yeah, so Xbox did outsell PlayStation 5 in November. So Xbox was your #2. PlayStation 5 was #3. And then we also found out that Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 combined was only slightly over Switch. So that shows you how bad shortages are for both of these platforms, that combined, they only did a little bit over Switch in a huge month like November. But that's your ranking. Switch #1, then Xbox Series consoles, and then PlayStation 5. Now, in terms of software, a couple standouts. First of all, Forza Horizon 5 has set the all-time biggest launch ever for any Forza game in the US. Keep in mind, this isn't Game Pass players, this is actual sales. Forza Horizon 5 had a bigger launch than any previous Forza Horizon game and bigger than any Forza Motorsport game. So great result for Forza Horizon 5. Here is your top 20. Number 1, Call of Duty Vanguard. No surprise, Call of Duty is pretty much always number 1 every single year. Keep in mind, we don't know how much that is down. We have a lot of evidence that this game is selling a lot lower than Cold War. But keep in mind, even if Call of Duty declines a bunch, it's such a massive game that even with a huge decline, it's not surprising it's number 1. Now, we don't know exactly how much it's down. Keep that in mind. But it is number 1 for the month. Number 2, Battlefield 2042. Number 3, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And keep in mind, that's a great result for Pokemon. And that's with no digital included because Nintendo does not include digital. So great result for Pokemon. Number 4, Forza Horizon 5, which as I mentioned, it's the biggest launch of all time for Forza. If you've been watching my chats for the last few weeks, really since Forza came out, I had a lot of people asking me what would be a great result for Forza Horizon 5. What do you think placement-wise on NPD would be good? And I always said top 5. Top 5 would be great considering how big of launches we have, right? Pokemon, Call of Duty, Battlefield. So to see it at number 4, great result there for Forza. Number 5, Madden 22. Number 6, Mario Party Superstars. Number 7, Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm actually pleasantly surprised by that. I hope to see that continue, right? To still be in the top 10, and especially in a huge month like November. Keep in mind, November's a giant month. This isn't like being number 7 in, let's say a pretty slow month like July, right? So it seems to be a pretty good result there. Now, we don't know exactly units or anything like that, but to see it top 10 in its second month, I am happy to see that for Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 8, FIFA 22. Number 9, Far Cry 6. Number 10, NBA 2K22. Number 11, Just Dance 22. Number 12, Mario Kart 8. Number 13, Spider-Man Miles Morales still legging in there. Spidey still in your top 20. Number 14, Animal Crossing New Horizons. Number 15, Back 4 Blood. Number 16, Shin Megami Tensei 5. And which, by the way, had the biggest launch ever for Shin Megami Tensei. Did I mention that? I don't know if I mentioned that. Sorry. If I didn't mention that at the beginning, that's also a good result for Shin Megami. All the way down at number 16 in its launch month might seem kind of low, but keep in mind, this is a pretty hardcore JRPG franchise. It's not even one of the bigger JRPG franchises, and it did set a launch dollar sales record, so that's also good. Number 17 is Minecraft, 18 Breath of the Wild, 19 Super Smash Bros, and number 20 Ghost of Tsushima, still legging in there. Okay, everyone, that is your basic rundown of the NPD results. If you have any questions or anything about that, drop it in chat. I didn't mention this at the top, but just in case, if this is your first time ever as part of my live chat, not a big audience today, so I'm sure this is pretty much, my regulars. But just in case you are coming through and you're new here, way this works, it's a show that's 100% driven by you, your comments, your questions. We basically just break down the biggest topics in the video game industry for the week. So 2 ways to do that. First of all, of course, there is the free method. You just type a question, pops into chat. I get to as many free questions as possible. If you want to guarantee that I get to your question, the way to do that is going to be the super chat option. Type a donation, whatever you want, and it alerts me and I get to those immediately. Keep in mind, do not feel pressured or obligated to donate in chat. It's just a way to support me and the channel. And yeah, I think I'll be able to get to all the free questions today, I'm sure. It's not a huge turnout, which isn't surprising to me. I'm streaming on a Friday, and right now Spidey's out. So I'm sure a lot of people are seeing Spider-Man today. Okay, let's start diving into your comments and questions. We have a 20, holy cow, a beefy super chat here from Plastic Hearts to start us off. Thank you so much, Plastic Hearts. That is incredibly kind and generous of you. Benji Boy, Tencent picks up another studio with Turtle Rock. What's your view on China's growing influence in gaming studios? Should we be worried, or is the fear overblown as far as their influence on content? It's a great question. So a couple thoughts with this. First of all, here's the thing. I know a lot of people kind of, you know, argue sometimes about acquisitions from like Sony and Microsoft and whether it's good or bad for the industry. Here's one thing to keep in mind. This is going to be very important for Sony and Microsoft in the future. If they have a studio that they are, you know, want to partner with, if they have a studio that they feel they have a close relationship with, and they want to continue that in terms of a very close relationship that's an independent team, they need to get on acquisitions, because the reality is if Sony doesn't buy them and if Microsoft doesn't buy them, or EA or Take-Two, Tencent and NetEase, like I said, to a lesser extent with NetEase, but they are a factor, but especially Tencent, they will come in and they will throw basically a ton of money at you to where you almost can't say no. So this is going to be an important thing for Microsoft and Sony over the next few years. You know, people look at a lot of these acquisitions as strictly, you know, Microsoft versus Sony, right? You're seeing a lot of conversation about that. Microsoft's trying to take these teams away from Sony, and Sony's trying to buy these teams just because of Microsoft. You know, that's only one factor in all this. People need to keep in mind Tencent particularly has been behind the scenes either buying studios or investing in studios heavily for the last few years, and that ain't going to change. So, you know, this is also another factor, is you want to get those teams before maybe Tencent comes in and gets them. So that's going to affect everything. Sorry, phone call. I'll ignore it. But yeah, so should we be, the specific question, should we be worried about China's growing influence in gaming studios? You know, I'm not a person that likes to, like, you know, demonize China like some people do. And I'm not saying you're doing this here, Plastic Hearts, by any means. But we do know that, you know, China's government is a little interesting, let's put it that way, compared to certain other ones. Should we be worried specifically about China and their growing influence? I would say that's not as big of a deal. However, the worry for me is somebody like Tencent in general, what maybe impact that specific company could have. Because Tencent, let's be honest, they don't have exactly the best reputation in terms of how they monetize and how they do things. There's a whole bunch of discussion in the industry right now about NFTs that's blowing up. So what I would say is, do I feel comfortable with Tencent buying, let's say, someone like Turtle Rock, as I would be if it came from Microsoft or Sony, right? Someone that's ingrained in this industry, somebody that has a long history here. We kind of know their strategies and business models and how they work. You know, definitely I'd be way more comfortable with Turtle Rock being bought by a company like this than over Tencent. So that is a bit of a worry, how Tencent's going to approach this industry, because here's the thing. Tencent's a giant player, but they haven't been a giant player in like the AAA console and major PC space, right? That's kind of something that they're building up right now. It's been more specifically games within China and also mobile games, right? And they're expanding heavily to start to appeal to the AAA console and AAA PC audience. You're seeing NetEase start to explore this too, because they want to expand their business, right? If you're kind of all focused in on mobile in China, well, there's a whole global market to appeal to as well. So it makes sense why they're making this big push with Western teams, Western studios, Western AAA games. So it's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be something we're going to have to keep an eye on for the next few years. Like, no doubt about it. This is a huge thing in the industry moving forward. So yeah, there's just a few of my thoughts. I'm sure there's going to be more questions about this. But yeah, would I have preferred Tencent to get acquired if they were going to be acquired at all by Sony or Microsoft or even, you know, a Take-Two? Definitely would have preferred that over Tencent. We'll have to see how it goes. Thank you for that super chat, Plastic Hearts. We had another beefy super chat here from Timmer. Holy cow, a 20 from Timmer, 72299 as well. Incredibly kind of you, Timmer. Plastic Hearts and Timmer basically in every chat, always being so supportive. Thank you so much. Super Mario 64's marketing budget was $20 million. Are you surprised Nintendo let that number slip? Was buried in one of the newspapers. Plus, Zenimax Europe doubled their profits last year. That's incredible. I didn't see that yet. Only releases Doom Eternal plus Elder Scrolls Online DLC. So a couple thoughts. First of all, $20 million marketing for Mario 64. That's actually a lot of money for the time period. Nowadays, 20 million is not really that much. I mean, it's a chunk. That's actually not even ultra cheap by today's standards if you're doing like a like let's say an AA game or something like that. For a AAA game, 20 million budget would be more on the low end. I mean, you see games now, the biggest AAA games, the big Grand Theft Autos and such, they'll do over 100 million in marketing spend just for launch period, and that only goes up with time. So, but for the time that Super Mario 64 came out, 20 million is pretty beefy for marketing. That is an impressive number for the time period. Clearly, like I said, not as impressive compared to some of the modern numbers we see, but it's also not nothing. Not nothing. And then in terms of Zenimax Europe, that's incredibly impressive because, like you mentioned, they didn't have a ton of major releases. For doubling profit, Doom Eternal obviously would have played a factor into that. We know Doom Eternal did especially well on PC. It had a huge launch last year. But an Elder Scrolls DLC... oh, wait, this is Doom Eternal DLC plus Elder Scrolls DLC because Doom Eternal would have been the prior year. So, yeah, that's actually really impressive. Only thing I can think of that would have doubled the profit. Man, maybe Elder Scrolls Online must be kind of on fire, right? Do we think that has to be it? Fallout 76, I'm sure, did something. People still play Fallout. That's impressive. That is an impressive number. I would have not predicted that for you, Timmer, that they would have doubled profit. I would have not predicted that at all. I would have not predicted that at all. That's pretty surprising. Okay, thank you for that super chat. Let's dive into your free questions. Super chats are cleared. Hammersley Ford, does the continuous acquisitions from NetEase and Tencent worry you? Let's be honest, we all know the Chinese government. Yeah, Chinese government is definitely a factor here, right? Like I said at the beginning, I don't like to necessarily demonize stuff coming out of China. Just because I don't like to do that with any country, right? I like to give everyone a fair shake. There is a little bit of a worry there, though, because, and here's the main fear, I would say, is we know that the Chinese government has more authority and control over businesses than what you see in the West, right? For the most part. Now, do I mean, Chinese government's going to be spying on people through Tencent games? That's not what I'm saying. What I mean is they have a lot more authoritative control about what can be and can't be in games. So that would be a slight worry that they could really force whatever they want in terms of like what's the word I'm looking for here? Censoring games however they want to with the games they develop, and also putting restrictions on games and stuff. So it's definitely a bit of a worry. I'm not going to say doom until I see how it goes, because we still haven't really seen Tencent fully into this AAA space or NetEase yet. Let's see how it goes. But it is a bit of a worry, yeah. Bit of a worry there in terms of they can control the content more heavily, right? The Deadly 8. Hello there, Benji. Hope you're doing well. PlayStation have over 25 games in development. Yeah, I know. Most of them aren't announced. How many new game announcements do you expect from them next year? Low number like 4 to 5. Big number like 7 to 8. Ooh, this is a great question. Great question, Deadly 8. So the big question here with Sony is a lot of these games aren't announced yet, right? They gave us that number quite a while ago now. They said over 25 games in development from PlayStation Studios, right? They weren't talking about games like Forspoken, which is a game that, they have an exclusivity deal on, but it wouldn't count as PlayStation Studios because they're not the publisher, right? Now, is this 25 games all directly coming from first-party Sony studios that they own? No, but they're 25 games that Sony's basically publishing, right? So if it is a third-party game, it's a game that gets that PlayStation Studios label, basically like how Returnal did, and the way Demon's Souls Remake did before those studios were bought, right? Both those games came out before those studios were bought. They were still PlayStation Studios games because Sony was funding it and Sony was publishing it. So not all of these are going to come from, Naughty Dog and Santa Monica, but definitely some of them are. Next year, I would expect... I'm going to actually go more for your low number, Deadly 8, in terms of like full-on announcements, like reveals of like 4 to 5 of these. 7 to 8 seems high for first-party, PlayStation Studios games. That seems high. That's even higher than what we're seeing out of stuff like Microsoft, who owns a lot of studios right now. even they aren't announcing like 8 games a year of brand new first party announcements. That to me seems pretty high. But I do think you will get a beefy chunk, right? Like this year, the announcements were pretty low for brand new games. We got a few, right? We got, oh man, let's think. If we go all the way back, no, God of War was announced last year. So this year we got obviously Wolverine. We got Spider-Man 2. Was that it from first party? They announced partnerships, but brand new first party game announcements might just be those Insomniac games, right? There might be 1 or 2 I'm forgetting, but yeah, 7 to 8 seems high to me. I'd say more like 4 to 5, maybe 6. You'll get more announcements than this year. This year, one of the things that really hurt announcements was all the delays, right? Keep in mind, Horizon was supposed to come out this year. Gran Turismo, God of War, they all got pushed to next year, so that's going to push everything back in terms of marketing. So, you'll get more announcements next year than you did this year, but 7 to 8 does seem high to me. Seems high. Joseki, hi Benji, your biggest surprise and your biggest letdown in video game sales from the recent US, EU, and Japan charts. Definitely the biggest letdown is stock of PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. That is without question the biggest disappointment, right? It doesn't have anything to do with demand on both of these platforms, but both of them are just not hitting the kinds of numbers you would like to see in their second holiday. Keep in mind, PlayStation 5 is actually starting right now to fall behind on shipments than PlayStation 4 launch aligned. That's going to be this quarter probably a pretty surprising amount how far it falls behind PlayStation 4. This quarter, you could see 500,000 to 1 million less PS5 shipped than the same point in time in the PS4's life cycle. I mean, that's a pretty big chunk, right? So that has nothing to do with demand. I mean, they'd be selling literally who knows how many units if they could make enough. But the fact that PlayStation 5 is going to start falling behind PS4 launch aligned, and I expect that to continue a lot through next year. Next year, they were shipping some, if you launch aligned them, right, same period of time in PS4's life cycle, there was no chip shortages. They were shipping huge amounts every single quarter. I just don't see that happening with PlayStation 5. PlayStation 5 may not be potentially, we're going to have to see how things shake out next year, but they may not be able to keep pace with PS4 until 2023. We might not see until 2023 that Sony can match the kind of shipment levels they were hitting with PS4. Now, early on, PS5 was keeping pace with PS4, but it seems that it's starting to fall behind. The Japan charts are just bad. I mean, they're just bad. There's no other way to phrase it. And then in the US, I mean, Switch plus Xbox Series plus PlayStation 5 combined sold less in a comparable period than what PS4, Xbox One, and Wii U did. And keep in mind, Wii U was a complete failure of a console. So it just shows you how low for a holiday period these shipment levels are for these consoles. I mean, there's just no other way to phrase it. That is without a doubt the biggest letdown. There's going to be huge repercussions from this, by the way. This generation is going to go on longer than normal. I expect a minimum of 8 years because it's going to take so long for these consoles to really get going in sales. If you notice, I'm talking a lot about Sony here in terms of not being able to keep pace with PS4. And that's because Microsoft is going to get sheer luck here. And it's kind of funny. They're going to get lucky in terms of comparisons to last gen, because Xbox One did so terrible in the upcoming months. Like, Xbox Series is actually almost assuredly the next 6 months to outsell the same pace that Xbox One did, because its bar is so much lower. One thing that's going to hurt Sony in terms of optics, this is purely optics, is going to be PS4 was such a smashing success. It was doing such huge numbers that with these shortages, it's going to become almost impossible for PlayStation 5 to keep pace. So Microsoft has a much easier comparison point just because their units are so much lower for Xbox One than what PlayStation 5 was doing. So in terms of like actual total sales volume, I fully expect PlayStation 5 to be selling more units than Xbox Series over the next 6 months. However, Xbox is going to be able to very easily put headlines out there about, hey, we're beating last gen, we're outpacing Xbox One, and it's just because the unit difference is so huge between the two last generation. So that's going to be a big bummer for both. It's going to extend the life cycle of these consoles because it's going to take so much longer for hardware to ramp the way we want it to. So yeah, that is without a doubt the biggest disappointment. Without question, that's the biggest disappointment. And then the biggest surprise, in a positive way, I would say is probably Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes, right? Their launch numbers globally basically were the same as Sword and Shield. That's pretty incredible for a remake. Now, I don't expect the legs to be as good because these are remakes and not a brand new generation, but that's probably the biggest positive. That and Forza Horizon 5 would probably be my two biggest standouts for the holiday period, because Forza set an all-time record for the Forza franchise, and that's while being on Game Pass. And then you have Pokemon remakes doing as well as Sword and Shield, which were a brand new generation. Yeah, those are probably my two positive highlights, and then my negative would definitely be just next-gen inventory. There's just nowhere near enough. Hammersley Ford. Starfield's Steam page went live 1 week ago, and currently it's the 10th most wished game. Wishlist, for some context, Elden Ring is second and Dying Light 2 is first. Is that a good metric to calculate hype? It actually is. So wishlist functions on Steam are not something that I do enough research on, to be honest with you. I need to do a lot more. It's just one particular metric. You know, there's so many metrics out there to try to keep track of every week, whether that's Steam charts, whether it's Japan charts, whether it's UK charts, whether it's NPD when that comes out, whether it's just Steam placements on the daily global top sellers, whether it's the box office stuff I look at. There's just so many metrics I'm always trying to keep track of. Wishlist is one that I don't do enough of, but I have heard from devs, and there's actually been a few articles about this as well. I think GameIndustry.biz did one of these not that long ago, that it is a useful metric. Now, is it a one-to-one metric? Does it mean that if a game is, number one on the wish list, that it's going to be the number one selling game, of the next few months when it comes out? It's not exactly one-to-one, but it is pretty useful, right? It is pretty useful. So something I need to keep more track of, and I'm not surprised Starfield is already 10th with a week to go, or with being out a week. Keep in mind, Elder Scrolls and Fallout are juggernauts on Steam. I expect that Starfield also will be, as long as it's remotely good. So not surprised by that. Joseki says, my personal letdown is PS5 stock. There just isn't any stock anywhere. Exactly. There's no doubt about it. That's the biggest, most unfortunate thing. PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series would be shattering records if they had the inventory for it. That's just really the bummer. Series S is actually getting a lot of stock right now. It's kind of saved Microsoft in a way. I was talking about this with somebody, I won't name them, because I don't know that they would want to be named, but I was talking to somebody about this a little bit behind the scenes, and we were discussing how, Series S really kind of accidentally saved Microsoft's butt here, because Series S has higher yields, smaller chip, easier to manufacture than Series X does. So what Microsoft has been able to do is basically save their holiday through Series S. If there was no Series S this holiday and they only had Xbox Series X, they would be in a dire situation because they are shipping so few Xbox Series X consoles. Like, if you compare just strictly Series X to PlayStation 5, PlayStation 5 is crushing Series X by itself. What's really helping Xbox is that Series S console, because they're able to make so many more of them. So they got, they couldn't have known when they were designing the Series S that this chip shortage was going to happen, but it kind of saved their butts that they launched this console. It really did. It really did. All right, Miles Morales. What do you think will push PlayStation to more diversity in their upcoming titles? Multiplayer and third-person action games are covered, but what about other genres like RPG, arcade racer, fighting, etc.? Could they feel the pressure and start developing those missing genres? I do think you're going to see more of that, Miles. I really think you're going to see a lot more. Just through some of the partnerships they've already announced, and even internally, I think they're going to explore more genres than kind of what they did on PS4. PS4 was somewhat safe for them in terms of their games really did for the most part. Of course, there's always exceptions. But as we all know, they really followed that third-person, story-focused template. And whenever I say template, I don't mean that in a negative way, as in like, oh, all these games are the same. Because they're not, right? God of War feels very different than something like The Last of Us. And The Last of Us feels very different than something like Spider-Man. But what do they all have in common? Pretty much all their biggest games last gen, without very few exceptions, were third-person, narrative-focused and driven games. Now, I do not expect them to abandon that, because that's really what got their studios so beloved. So you're still going to see tons of those games. Sony's not going to turn their back on that audience that really has elevated their first party in terms of sales, right? PlayStation saw huge growth in first party sales last generation. So there's no way they abandon that. But I think they do look at the market and they look at the industry and they see how big, some other genres are, right? So I do think so. I think you're going to see some RPGs out of them this generation, whether that's directly first party or if it's these publishing deals that we're seeing. I think you're going to see some shooters out of them because they really have like no shooters coming out of Sony right now, which is a little weird because it's one of the biggest genres in the world, right? Shooters and RPGs. Those are two of your biggest genres in the world, and Sony's not really making either one. So I definitely think you'll see some. Again, whether these will be Santa Monica making an FPS, I ain't saying something like that. But whether it's directly through their first party or through these publishing deals that they've announced a bunch of, and I'm sure more are coming, you'll see more. They will explore more genres this gen than last. I'm almost certain of that. I think we had a super chat drop. Let me hit that super chat. We did. We had 2 super chats, both from Benji. Thank you so much, Benji. Benji here with a 5 super chat. Hi, Benji. Is the bad PS5 performance could affect platform choice for some Japanese third-party devs? It's absolutely going to, yes. For example, Dragon Quest or Dynasty Warriors, talking about Japan PS5 sales only. So, yes, this is going to have effect. Now, for the big games like Dragon Quest, I fully expect Dragon Quest to be multi-platform. Here's the thing. If you want to grow these franchises in the West, PlayStation's still an important element because PlayStation will have such a giant install base in the West. What this is really going to affect, I don't think it's actually going to affect much of the big AAA output from Japan because, again, you're going to just want... Don't get me wrong, Switch is giant in the West. So, as we've said, it's basically been the number one selling platform for like 3 years in the US. So, I expect these games to come to Switch as well. Like Dragon Quest, I fully expect on Switch, but I also fully expect it on PlayStation 5. And that's because PlayStation is still going to have... PS5 is going to sell over 100 million units lifetime. I feel almost certain of it because the demand is there. Really, the only reason it's starting to fall behind PS4 on shipments, like we discussed, that's just... chip shortages. Has nothing to do with demand. Pretty hard if you're making a big AAA game to ignore what will eventually be 100 million install base, right? Because nowadays we see games lag forever due to digital sales. So pretty hard to ignore that. But what it is going to affect, there's just no question about it. You've even seen some Japanese publishers and devs start to talk about this. It's going to affect those AA and smaller Japanese games. The ones that don't necessarily have the giant budget to be, or resources to be making multiple versions of games and to be getting their marketing across all platforms and having teams dedicated, because Switch and PlayStation are very, very different in terms of development, right? It's not like Xbox and PlayStation where the two overlap hardware-wise so similarly. Like, it's a lot less effort if you're already making a game for PlayStation to port it to Xbox than it is to make a game for Switch and then also port it to PlayStation 5. Just way bigger differences in hardware there. So what the risk is for Sony, because for anyone that's not paying attention, PlayStation 5 sales in Japan are literally dire. They are catastrophically bad right now. There's literally no other way to phrase it. In the West, things aren't that bad, but in Japan, it is a catastrophic performance in Japan currently. I mean, we're talking this thing selling about 1,000 units in Japan weekly right now. It's abysmal. So that is a big risk. Big risk. Again, is this going to affect Final Fantasy, Forspoken, these kinds of things? Not at all. Just way too much Western demand to ignore something like PlayStation. But those smaller games, those AA games, yeah. I mean, if you only have resources to make them for one platform, it's going to be Switch if you're in Japan. So, yep, no doubt. No doubt, Benji, that this has potential long-term ramifications. So they're going to have to do some stuff to change that around. And then Timmer came in here with another 5 super chat. Thank you so much, Timmer. Comparing back to Mario. For comparison, Banjo-Kazooie's marketing budget was $10 million. Yeah, that's what I was saying. And Killer Instinct 1994 is $20 million. Plus hit that like button. Thank you so much, Timmer. Thank you for the extra super chat. It's incredibly kind, and the kind words about the like button. Yeah, I mean, $20 million for that time period is pretty beefy, right? We're talking double the budget of Banjo-Kazooie. Obviously, something like Mario is a lot bigger than something like Banjo, but $20 million for the time period, that's pretty impressive. So, yeah, thanks for digging that up, Timmer, and keep up the great work as always. Thank you so much, man. Okay, super chats are back to clear for now. Batman Forever. The industry consolidation phase is at its peak right now. The big four, Tencent, NetEase, Microsoft, Sony, are acquiring studios left and right. I am wondering, can they maintain a healthy, diverse developers and IPs when their owners only care about making money and nothing else? Could this lead to less creative freedom in the industry and less diversity in games overall? Batman, I am not particularly worried about that in terms of Sony and Microsoft. In fact, for Microsoft particularly, you're seeing a way more diverse output than they've ever had in their entire history as a company since Game Pass started. Like, if you just look across the board, they've got RPGs in development. They've got smaller, small projects like Grounded in development. They've got stuff like Flight Sim. They've got racing games. I mean, they're hitting like every genre you can imagine. They now have the linear third-person games with Hellblade. And Sony, I expect, again, them to diversify more than they were last gen. And even then, we're seeing some experimental stuff, right? You saw something like Returnal. And then you're seeing, Gran Turismo, which is, of course, a long-standing franchise, but that's a racer. And I think that's only going to diversify. I'm less worried with Sony and Microsoft because they're platform holders. And one way that you want to drive interest to your platform, particularly from a first-party output, is diversity, right? You want to appeal to a lot of different audiences so they want to go out and buy your console. So Sony and Microsoft, I'm honestly not worried about at all in terms of these acquisitions affecting them being diverse. Because you can also position games to be, if you're strictly a third-party developer, you live and die by the profit margins that your games make, like your software. For someone like Sony and Microsoft, obviously they want all of their games to be highly profitable, but if one isn't like the most profitable game in the world, but let's say it still gets a lot of awards recognition, or, it does hit a different audience than what you normally do, that hurts you a little less because you're driving a full platform. You're not just, like I said, if you're Activision, you live and die by how much money your game makes. Or, EA or Tencent or all these companies, right? It's purely about how much are your games generating in profit. But yeah, someone like Tencent, NetEase, that's, again, like we've been talking about, that's a bigger worry. But I wouldn't worry too much about Microsoft and Sony here. I really wouldn't. Sounds PP7. How ambitious do you think the Splinter Cell remake will be? Pretty ambitious, I think. And what do you hope it changes? If successful, could Ubi decide to make linear sequels to Blacklist, or will they remake 2 and 3 as well? This is a great question because it's something that we're going to have to see how these new remakes play out. Now, remakes aren't new for like big, giant, beloved franchises. One thing we're seeing that's a little interesting, we're starting to see remakes be made for games that, like, their future was questionable. And this is actually a bit of a new exploration in this industry. We're seeing EA do it with Dead Space, and now we're seeing Ubisoft do this with Splinter Cell. Keep in mind, for at least a lot of the time recently, a lot of the full-on remakes you would see would be clearly for franchises that are beloved, that are going to keep going, right? You saw stuff like Dragon Quest get remakes. You saw something like Final Fantasy get a remake with 7, which clearly is, Final Fantasy is a juggernaut franchise. But now you're seeing some companies where they're like, hey, there's demand for this franchise, but just how much demand? And the way they're kind of making themselves less risk averse is they're taking the beloved, entries in the franchise. They're like, let's remake this. So I would say in terms of the future, like what this is going to do, I think it remains to be seen. Like if Dead Space Remake is a giant success, are they going to just directly remake Dead Space 2? Or are they going to kind of like have a reimagining and they're going to have a Dead Space 2, but it's not an exact remake, right? It's just some sort of new follow-up to the Dead Space universe. Same thing with Splinter Cell. That remains to be seen. It's a great question, Silence, and I don't think we actually fully have the answers yet. We're going to just have to watch that with time as these sorts of remakes start to happen. Because clearly, Ubisoft and EA are both doing this because they're trying to revitalize these franchises, right? They're not just randomly doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They're wanting these games to be successful so they can continue Splinter Cell and they can continue Dead Space. So yeah, we're going to have to watch. Really, it's a great question, Silence, and I don't think we actually have the answers yet and how they'll tackle this. And in terms of how ambitious, I think pretty ambitious. Is it going to be like we're going to add tons of new areas and content that were never in the original? I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of that, but I also don't expect this to be a pretty cheap remake. I think it's going to be decently beefy. Yeah, maybe not, $100 million budget type game, but I don't think they're going to go cheap here, put it that way. I think it'll be a pretty, good sized remake. Because we know EA is clearly doing that with Dead Space. Like, Dead Space is not a cheap remake. They're making a full-on beefy one, and I think their plan for Ubisoft to Splinter Cell to do similar. Ryan Thompson here with a really great question. It is a great question. Kind of looking forward kind of question. What are you hoping to see next year in terms of the gaming industry as a whole from Ryan? Okay, let's talk about that. What's just some, what do we want to see out of the industry? And you guys can drop yours down into chat too if you want. I'd love to read them. One thing I want to see, clearly the thing that's most important to me looking at it as a business, I want to see chip shortages somewhat improve. Now, everyone I've spoken to inside the industry and out all thinks chip shortages are not going away in 2022. What I'm hoping for, my hope, right? Because that's the question. What are you hoping to see? I hope they at least improve. Because right now it's just so bad. It's so bad. So do I think next year we're going to get to a spot where, you can regularly walk into a store and buy a PlayStation 5 and Series X? They're just sitting on shelves all the time? No. I actually don't expect that to happen until 2023. But if we could get to the point where it's like, hey, you're not battling bots for, y'all, there's people that have been trying to buy these consoles since launch that still don't have them. That's not an exaggeration. There's people that have been trying to buy these consoles for a year and still have not been able to get one. So my hope, again, will we be at a point where you can just any day of the week walk into a store and just buy a PlayStation 5? No, I don't expect that. But if we could get to the point where, hey, if you look hard for like a week or two, you're going to be able to get one. That to me would be a huge improvement on its own. So yeah, hope to see an improvement on chip shortages. That's my main hope for hardware. And in terms of software, I just hope that we actually get to have more of these big games truly launch and not keep getting delayed, right? This was a great year overall in terms of software. There was a lot of awesome stuff, but we also know tons of games got pushed. Tons. And there's going to be more delays next year. But my hope is it's not quite as brutal, right? That our delays are not as severe, so more of these games can come out and be successful. So those would be my two main hopes. chip shortages to get better and less delays. Yoda Soda, do you think part of the reason why there's so many cross-gen titles released next year is because of the delays, or do you think developers will continue to support last gen until chip shortages stop? Yoda Soda, it's kind of both a bit, but 2023 you're going to start to see almost exclusively next gen only titles. It really is. Like, and when I say next gen, we're in current gen now. A big factor is the delays. Like, a lot of these games that are cross-gen were actually supposed to be out this year, right? Batman Gotham Knights, that was supposed to be this year. Now it's next year. Hogwarts Legacy was supposed to be this year. Now it's next year. Horizon Forbidden West, God of War, right? We can go down the list. A lot of those cross-gen games were delayed. However, I do think the industry as a whole planned on supporting the cross-gen period for about 2 years anyways. So that was already kind of part of the plan. Plus all the delays push more cross-gen games into next year. However, you've already seen a bunch announced, and I also know that there's a bunch more that are next-gen only in 2023. So that's really going to shift. By the time we hit 2023, even with chip shortages, I don't think you see almost any cross-gen games outside of maybe Call of Duty and sports titles. Besides that, like 90% of games by 2023, not 2022, 2023, they aren't going to be for PS4 and Xbox One. And you can kind of already see that in announcements, right? A lot of the games that are announced for 2023 and beyond, they're not cross-gen. Ghost Tunnels. Do you think it is possible for licensed games to make a huge comeback in the coming years? Yeah, they kind of already are. Like, could we see even more games based on beloved licenses like The Simpsons, Disney, and Pixar? Ghost Tunnels, yes. Licensed games are having a bit of a resurgence. They kind of died in a way during the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 generation. You still had a few pop up, but they really, really, really greatly shrunk down. But now you're starting to see that pick up heavily again, right? You saw Spider-Man come out and be a giant success. You've seen a whole lot of Marvel games get announced and come out recently. Same thing with Star Wars. You've seen a bunch of Star Wars games come out or get announced recently towards the tail end of Xbox, of PS4 and Xbox One into the new gen. You're seeing WB now pump out a lot more of their IP too. You're getting stuff like Wonder Woman now in the works. So yeah, I actually do think licensed games are going to increase this generation in demand. I don't know if we're going to get to a point where there's just like tons of them. Like kind of in the PS1 generation, there was a ton of licensed stuff. I don't know if we're going to go that high, but I do think you're going to see more. Yeah, I do think you'll see more. I definitely think so. For sure. I mean, Dune, right? There's a new Dune game that's coming out they just announced. So yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Ulfric Stormcloak. Here we go. Let's get into NFTs. Do you think the situation with NFTs are going to get worse or better after Stalker 2 listened to the fans and removed everything NFT related? Ulfric, I've talked about this. On a personal level, I'm not a fan of NFTs. Anyone that follows me will know this because you've followed me for a while. I'm not a soapbox preacher kind of guy. Just not really my thing. Like, you're not going to see me go on my Twitter and damning people that like NFTs, right? You're just not going to see me do it. It's just not something I'm really interested in. I think almost always that only leads to bad results in terms of conversation and in terms of just conversations. That doesn't mean I'm above or, like I'm against putting my personal opinion out there on something, right? Like, I am not a fan of NFTs. I will never spend a cent on NFTs. And particularly in games, I do not like NFTs. Just not a fan of it. However, am I going to go out there on my Twitter and scream, "You're a bad person if you've bought NFTs"? No. Who the hell am I to tell you what you can and can't do in your own life, right? It's not. Y'all, I am not a perfect person. There's all kinds of stuff I do all the time I regret. Why am I going to get on a soapbox and preach to you about how you should do this, you sir? I hate that stuff. I think it's so lame. So you won't ever see me do that, whether it's NFTs or other stuff. I mean, if we get into like something crazy, like you're being a straight up, evil jerk racist or something like that, that's a bit of a different conversation. Something like NFTs, I'm not into, but there are people that are into it and think it's cool. I don't think it's the best thing for the environment or for the world, but I'm not going to preach to you about it. So specifically about games, do I think that the stalker situation is going to make NFTs better or worse? I just think NFTs in games isn't really going to work. Like, I just don't think it's something that's really going to work out for the player or for devs and publishers. Like, it seems to me that NFTs in games specifically do nothing advantageous to a player, right? And you see some people compare, well, how's NFT? People are pro NFT. You see them say, how is an NFT any different than any other microtransaction? And the main reason is that like a microtransaction, is probably going to be cheaper than what the long-term plan, we'll have to see, but what the long-term plan for NFTs are, right? These companies are only exploring NFTs. Like, let's be real. The only reason is to make a lot of money, right? They want to make a ton of money. That's kind of the whole purpose of NFT is it's an investment. A microtransaction in most games are not going to be ultra expensive, right? So you spend a few bucks, whatever it is, you buy the thing, or if you buy an expansion in DLC, let's say you get 30 hours out of that expansion or something, like you as the player are getting something back from it that you really enjoy. An NFT in a game, I just don't see how that's going to generate value for the player outside of just hoarding it so you can resell it later on. That to me does not seem like a player advantage. It just seems like generating a lot of money out of a small group of your audience strictly for that only reason. So that's why I'm just not a fan of it in games. And I just don't think it's going to work out. I honestly don't. I can't tell you that NFTs won't ever be successful in the rest of the world. Again, I'm never going to spend a cent on them, but maybe NFTs become a thing that legitimately has life and legs. Games, though, I just think it's bad. It seems purely like a way of just obviously trying to take money from your players, right? Which is what makes it a bit different to me than microtransactions or DLC. We all know that's what the purpose is to generate additional revenue, but you have the belief that you're getting something in-game advantageous back from you that you're going to use a lot. Most of these NFTs are just like, look at this one cool helmet that you can sell eventually. Like, that's the main selling point. You can resell this. Just feels like, hey, let's get as much money out of a small group of people as possible. So, not a fan of it. I think it's a big warning sign to the industry that probably a lot of people aren't for this. And I don't think this will be the end of it. I think you're going to see a couple other people still try to push hard on NFT. I just personally don't expect any of those to be successful. I don't think any of these NFT ventures are going to take off. I think you're going to get a lot of player pushback and probably eventually mostly get abandoned in games. But it'll happen another couple times before they stop. Yeah, you'll have to see several more get that Stalker 2 response, or Ubisoft did with theirs, before they stop trying. They're going to try. They're going to definitely try. Sounds PP7, what do you make of the Forspoken gameplay clip? A lot of people weren't impressed. I'll be honest, I'm one of them. But it possibly could have been an older build, and it's still months away. See anything that should be addressed? I thought, if you haven't seen it, there's like a 4-minute gameplay clip that was released for Forspoken, and I'll be shocked at how rough it looked. Forspoken literally is one of my most anticipated games of next year. Yeah, I've been working on my top 10 most anticipated games for next year list, and it is currently on there because I love, a big Square Enix RPG. Like, I love that stuff. That gameplay to me was kind of shocking how just didn't look great. Like, in general, I was really caught off guard by this, to be honest. Very caught off guard. Keep in mind, this game doesn't come out until May. They still have like another 5 months of polish on this thing. 5 months is actually a decent amount of time in development for polish phase. So it's not like this thing's 2 months away. You can actually get quite a bit done in 5 months once the game's already really far along. Like in those early days of development, it's much harder because you're just spinning up concepts and stuff. Like a huge chunk of development is just getting your game working and just getting the thing going off the ground. Towards the end, that's when you see a lot of games really come together. They say in those last like 6 months or so, 6 to 8 to 12, right around there. That last year in particular, but even 6 months can have a huge difference on a game. So they still have till May. So I'm hopeful that actually at launch, this thing's going to look a lot better than it is. The gameplay, it just all around, it just seemed rough. So yeah, I'm hopeful, but I am a little worried for Silence. I would not lie. For Spoken, that gameplay worried me a bit. But we can't write it off yet when you still have that much time. Venom Harness. It has been 1 year since Microsoft acquired a publisher. So good news. Could this mean Microsoft isn't looking to buy even more publishers, or is that still a possibility and they're getting ready for it? Venom, they absolutely could still buy another. Absolutely. I've talked about this before. I think the main reason you haven't seen more acquisitions from Microsoft is I really think they just took the last year to focus on Bethesda. Because not only did Microsoft not acquire another publisher in the last year, they haven't really acquired anybody in terms of new studios. So my guess, and I don't know this firsthand, what I do know firsthand is they're buying more teams. I know that for sure that Microsoft's making more acquisitions. However, I don't know they're going to buy another publisher. But my guess, and this part I don't know for sure, but my guess, just reading the tea leaves and looking around the industry, Bethesda was such a giant acquisition. It was not one studio, but multiple studios. I think Microsoft's plan was probably, hey, let's take a year to get this thing fully organized into our business, because that's not a small thing. To buy an entire publisher, however many studios that is, more than 6, I think, could be 7 or 8, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a lot. To get them all ingrained with your culture, getting all your teams talking to each other, sitting down with all of these teams and looking at the future roadmap and discussing how we're going to do this, what games we're going to release when, how we're budgeting things, figuring everything out. I mean, that's a gigantic undertaking. It's not like when you buy one studio. Even buying 1 or 2 studios, it's a lot of work to get them integrated. But to buy a whole publisher, I mean, it's enormous. So I'm not surprised we haven't seen any new ones. I think they're going to start acquisitions again in 2022. I don't know that you're going to see 5 teams bought in 2022, but I'll be utterly shocked if you get to the end of 2022 and Microsoft hasn't bought another studio or 2. I fully expect it. And another publisher's not off the board. No, it's really not. It's really not off the board. I don't think it's a lock, but I also don't think Microsoft's opposed to it. I was talking on Twitter today with somebody, and they were talking about how, Tencent's so big now and they're a threat. Don't get me wrong, Tencent are, but they were talking about how, I think it was partially a joke, but they're like, Tencent's going to buy Microsoft. Some people still, I think, don't quite realize how utterly gigantic Microsoft is. $2.4 trillion, not billion, trillion dollar market cap. Like, the Bethesda purchase was so insignificant to the company as a whole that I was on that conference call that quarter. Not a single investor asked a single question about the Xbox division. Not only did they not ask about Bethesda, they didn't even ask one question about Xbox. And that's in a quarter that Microsoft spent $7 billion to buy somebody. Investors were so unconcerned they didn't even ask one question about the Xbox business. Like, they have so much money that buying another publisher is not remotely a concern. Now, again, do I expect that? I don't know. But in terms of pure, do they have the money to do it? They could buy another publisher and not even bat an eye at it. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see how this goes. But they're going to start acquiring people again soon. Yeah, probably next year. King Lizards, do you think NFTs are the future? Oh, we talked about this. Of this industry. No, not at all. Do you think it is possible that they will replace loot box and microtransactions? No, not at all. Or would the 3 coexist? What's your overall thoughts? Kind of like what I said, I don't think they're going to take off at all. honestly. I don't think it's going to be a big deal at all in games. I don't know about outside of games, but in games, I don't expect NFTs to make any sort of head ground at all. I just don't think that there's demand for NFT. I just really don't. Ryan Scott, video games take 5 to 6 years to develop most of the time. Do you think the time it will take to develop games will decrease with how easy and accessible next-gen consoles are and support studios existing? Ryan, this is a bit of an interesting question, and I actually think you're onto something, Ryan. So, as we know, like, it has taken, like, as the years have gone on in the gaming industry, budgets have gotten bigger, player demands have gotten bigger, and with that, development times have gotten bigger, right? AAA games are now such gigantic undertakings. You can't put out a game really in a year or two like you used to. I mean, there was a time period, you go back to like the early days, you go back to like PS1 and PS2. I mean, it was not uncommon to make a game in 2 years. Not uncommon at all. Now, were there ones that took longer? Of course. But it's not like it was unheard of to make a game in 2 years. Nowadays, pretty freaking rare. Not impossible. I'm not going to say it'll never happen. Pretty rare. Most games are taking at least 4 years. Like Ryan said, at least 4, and you are seeing some be 5 to 6. Like, that is also actually not uncommon to see. And 4 is kind of like, some do 3. The Call of Duty studios are doing 3 right now. But you even see how much trouble they're having, right? Even the Call of Duty studios are struggling to put out a game every 3 years. But I do think you might start to see output increase. And partially it's exactly what you're saying, Ryan. I think there's going to be a ton of demand moving forward for support studios. There's a reason, we talked about this in the last live chat, that you're seeing Sony start to buy up support teams. And I think it is for that specific reason, to help get their games out quicker. I think demand for that is only going to rise, not go down, rise. So if you are wanting to start like a development house, or you have a development house that's already a support studio, I think there's so much growth potential in your future, because these huge AAA projects require so many resources to get made. So you see stuff like Unreal Engine 5 that's trying to do a lot of stuff to make development easier on devs, stuff like Nanite. I think we might see that, Ryan. Will we ever get down to 2-year development cycles for games? No. But could we see that 5 to 6 go down to 3 to 4, for a lot of games? I don't think that's impossible. I don't think it's impossible. I really don't. We're going to have to see how things play out. But it's possible. It's possible. Splinter 89. When are you seeing Spidey? Tonight. I'm going tonight, and I can't freaking wait. Spider-Man tonight. Don't know if you have all been seeing, but it is shattering records, which is not surprising to me. J-Cat saying, what's up? What is up, J-Cat? Oh, wait, we had a super chat. Let me hit the super chat. Highlander001 with a 5 super chat. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, Highlander. Thank you so much for that. Favorite holiday tradition in food? Did you get your shopping done? Think we will ever see an MMA fighting game? Oh, we do have one for the UFC. But outside of the UFC, there have been some in the past. I just don't know if there's enough demand, let's say, for like a Bellator fighting game, or like, a one championship fighting game or something like this. Possible that we see one outside of the UFC if someone takes a lot of these. Here's the thing that would make it a challenge. Like, I just don't think Bellator by itself, or ONE FC by itself, or Eagle Fighting Championship, or all these other ones. I don't think they have a big enough roster of in-demand fighters to have a game focused on them. So what you would have to do, you would have to get a deal struck where these promoters would agree to be in a game together. Again, not unheard of. I think this has actually happened before in the past, but you'd have to get multiple, right? You'd have to get Bellator to sign off, and you'd have to get ONE and all of them to sign off, hey, our fighters can be licensed in this game. And that just becomes a lot more challenging. Like the thing that makes it easy for EA to make the UFC games, A, UFC is the biggest promoter in the world for MMA, and then B, you just get the whole roster with one, right? You get a giant roster by just making a UFC game. Whereas, you know, if you want to have those other fighters, you have to make a deal with each individual promotion. And that just becomes way harder, way more difficult. So not impossible you see one outside of the UFC game, but I would say it's unlikely. And then in terms of my favorite holiday tradition and food, oh man. Are we talking across the board or are we talking just Christmas? You know, since I've become a dad, I'm a lot more cheesy about this stuff. Like, I love just taking my daughter to go see Christmas lights. Like, I love it. She gets so happy. She loves the Christmas lights, you know, and I love to just see her face when she's, you know, opening presents and stuff. Like, it sounds cheesy, I know, but man, becoming a dad changed me a lot, and I really just love my kiddo. So really, anything that makes her happy is my favorite part of any holiday. It really is. So I would say that is my favorite part of the holidays, is actually just her, seeing her be happy and having fun. My shopping is done. Yeah, luckily I got that out of the way early this year. Usually I'm a last minute shopper, but I've been done since weeks ago. So. And then my favorite food, really quick. You know, honestly, I'm a Thanksgiving dinner kind of guy. Don't get me wrong, love Christmas and stuff. I know Thanksgiving is a different holiday, but I'm a sucker for Thanksgiving dinner, man. Turkey and gravy and all that goodness. That's what I'm a sucker for. I go ham on Thanksgiving. So I would say that. I would say, you know, the expected Thanksgiving dinner. That is my favorite for sure. Thank you so much, Highlander, for that super chat, and I hope you're doing well. All right. I still got time to hit some more questions, so don't worry, everybody that's still here. We're going to rock for another about 20 minutes. So I'm still going to be able to hit a lot of questions, because we go for about an hour and a half usually. So we still got about another 20 minutes. Logan Hardy, hey Benji, is it weird that there are no numbers from Xbox on Halo? No, I've seen some people say, oh, does this mean Halo did less than Forza? There's almost a 0% chance of that, because every single thing that we have a metric to look at, Halo's above Forza. So it had a way higher peak concurrent all time on Steam than Forza did. It has a much higher daily player count than Forza did on Steam. Even right now, way over Forza. And on Xbox, both campaign and multiplayer are above Forza on the charts. So there's basically a 0% chance that Forza's had more players than Halo, even as big as Forza was. So put it this way, I didn't expect numbers. After that first week of the beta of Halo, I kind of realized that, oh, they're not going to do numbers right now. And I kind of realized, wait, they're going to wait for a launch day. Because keep in mind, their phrasing was it was a beta. So once we didn't get those numbers first week, you know, that was out, I was like, oh, they ain't going to give us anything before December. Like, we ain't going to get nothing. And so, no, I think we will get numbers, but I think they're waiting. I think they want them to build as big as possible and maybe put that out at the end of the year. Here's what I'll say, Logan, it will be very weird and concerning to me if by the beginning of next year, and when I say beginning, I mean like that first week of January, if we don't have a Game Pass update or a Halo update, that's when I would start to really question things. That's when I'd start to be like, I feel like you should have a PR win right now, so why is that PR win not coming out? So not super weird to me right now. It's the holidays. They just want to bank up as high of numbers as possible, I think. We're literally in the middle of December. I'm sure they're expecting a huge surge in Game Pass and Halo and Forza players, you know, with all these consoles that are getting bought for Christmas, etc., and people get them and start playing. So, like I said, if you don't hear anything by early January, that's when it would be a bit of a red flag for me. That's when it would be a bit of a red flag. Miles Morales, do you think it's possible PlayStation will create an open world racer to compete with Forza Horizon. It'd be super smart. I mean, why not just make Gran Turismo Horizon? Like, don't call it that per se, right? I mean, Gran Turismo whatever, but you already have a giant brand there in Gran Turismo. And now Forza Horizon has become more popular than mainline Forza. So is it impossible to think that if they had a Gran Turismo version of something similar, maybe not an exact same thing, but similar to Horizon, that it could maybe even overtake regular Gran Turismo? I don't think that's impossible, because one of the reasons Forza Horizon is so big is it's way more accessible, and it's a nice mix between arcadey and realistic. Like, it doesn't feel as arcadey as something like some of the like Need for Speed games, for example, feel at times. It feels like a nice balance between the two, and the open world and new settings are a huge draw. I mean, I think it'd be smart. The question is if they have anybody that could do it, right? Like, Microsoft got extremely lucky because Turn 10 doesn't make it, right? It's a whole different studio. Playground makes it. Like, Polyphony Digital just doesn't have the resources to make mainline Gran Turismo and some sort of Horizon franchise. Like, they do not have the staff for it. Look how long it takes them to make a regular Gran Turismo game. So Sony would have to find the right partner with the right resources to make it happen. If they could, I think it'd be smart, because there's clearly huge demand for games like this. But I don't know. I don't know if they'll do it or not. They're going to have to find the right people to make it. But, I mean, it'd be smart. Like I said, if, let's say, a perfect case scenario, you got the team that you feel could make it, you've got the brand in Gran Turismo, do you just ignore that? I would say no, right? But they might not be able to find the right partner for it. Sean Macias, do you think there is a future for Google Stadia? Not feeling good about it. The tech behind Google Stadia is, from what I hear, really good. I've never used it, but I've heard it's solid. Could it stick around as just kind of a strictly third-party streaming thing? I would say that's not impossible, but will Google Stadia ever become a giant thing? I think those days are basically over. Once they shut down all their in-house development, once they stopped signing exclusive deals, and really they pulled all marketing from the thing, you don't see Google Stadia get marketed anymore. No, it'll never be a giant player, I don't think. Is it going to be equal to what xCloud is going to be eventually, or what, PlayStation's eventually going to get PS Now to? I think there's 0% chance. But could it potentially just stick around as an additional thing out there? Possible. But its days are basically over in terms of trying to become a major competitor. They don't even market it anymore. You never see anything Google Stadia anywhere. So, and they shut down all development. That kind of tells you where Google see it at. Fernando Harada, Benji, do you think we will see another Killzone game soon? I miss this franchise. I would love to see it. I'm a huge fan of Killzone. I even loved Killzone 3. I know some people didn't like Killzone 3 as much as Killzone 2. I think I'm in the weird outlier in that I liked Killzone 3 more than 2. And I really liked Killzone 2, but I actually loved Killzone 3. I platinumed that game. I would love to see Killzone come back. There's been lots of rumors just through the hiring that Guerrilla is making an FPS. Again, none of us know that for sure. They've just hired a lot of FPS talent. So could be they hired them to work on Horizon. They just were sick of making first-person shooters and they wanted to make something else. That's possible, but considering they hired multiple FPS-specific devs, that usually makes you think that you're spinning up an FPS title. So is that going to be a reboot of Killzone, or is it going to be a brand new IP, or even something else who knows, SOCOM or something? Who knows? But I'd love to see Killzone come back. I'd love it. I just really think it's a cool universe. Was Killzone a perfect game? No. as we all know, like the acting and narrative is not its strong suit. Like some of the some of the characters and stuff weren't exactly like amazing writing, but I just think it has such a cool universe and cool art style. I'd love to see it come back. Oh, this is always fun. We had a first-time listener, Zilton. I hope I'm saying that right. Hi, Benji. First time listening live to you. Well, welcome. I love seeing people here for the first time. It's always awesome to see all the familiar faces, but love seeing new people as well. A question, though. I just seen a Battlefield 2042 ad when playing Battlefield 5. It says you get to play for free in 2042 for more or less 4 days. Is this a sign of bad sales, or is it part of normal strategy? What about Battlefield 2042 price drops lately so soon after release? So basically, what is the current move say to us about Battlefield 2042 is doing? Battlefield 2042 appears, we don't know this for sure, but it appears to have had very poor legs. Now, Battlefield had clearly very good upfront sales. I mean, it was number 2 in November in the US, right? That's a great result. Don't think it was a record breaker, though, because usually Matt and NPD will point out record breakers like he did for Shin Megami Tensei 5 and he did for Forza this month. There was no mention of a record for Battlefield 2042. So what that says to me, sold less than Battlefield 1. Did it sell less than any of the other ones? Who knows? But it at least appears to have sold less than Battlefield 1. So, but it still had big upfront sales. However, this game has fallen off the Steam charts. It also, like in terms of sales, the weekly sellers. And it's also, I mean, even made a tweet about this. I don't particularly normally cover this game has lost this many players because it happens to almost every game. However, Battlefield for a multiplayer game has a pretty low peak daily now on Steam. In fact, I think it's under 30,000 now almost every day. A lot of times I look at it and it's only doing like 17,000 players or something on Steam. For a big multiplayer game, that's pretty low. For example, something like Halo, which I know Halo is free to play, that has also come down from its peak. Again, not abnormal. But Halo is still doing something like 90 to 100,000 peak players per day. It's a lot more than Battlefield, right? Huge amount higher. So, again, free to play, so it's not a perfect comparison point. But Battlefield's fallen off hard. I would say there are signs that Battlefield's legs are bad. We're going to have to see more charts over time, see how it does in December NPD, see how it does, on the Steam charts throughout the rest of December and into January. But yeah, I don't think legs are good. I think it's falling off really hard. Michael Yu. Looks like Halo is selling well. Selling well on Steam and number 4 in the latest weekly UK charts. Would you agree that it's a shoo-in to be top 10 for December NPD? Yes, it is. It'll be top 10. So let's talk about Halo sales. We know it was the lowest in the UK of the big 3 shooters this year in sales for launch, but that's to be expected. Anyone that's watched my chat, and I was getting asked this question a lot, and I always said, even from the beginning, that I did not expect, I expected Halo to be 3rd in sales, but I always said the interesting thing is going to be to watch players. Could Halo have more players than something like Battlefield? I always expected raw unit sales to be below those two for a very, very obvious reason. First of all, both Call of Duty and Battlefield are fully cross-gen, so those games are on PlayStation as well, which Halo's not. And also, Halo has 2 ways for you to interact with this game without spending a dime on it outside of your Game Pass subscription. So Game Pass, you can play the campaign. Y'all, I've put I think I've put something like 60 or 70 hours into Halo now. I didn't buy it. I won't show up on any chart for having purchased this game. And it's literally a game I'm playing a ton of because I have spent some money as I bought the Battle Pass, but that won't count on a sales chart. So Halo, if you only want to play multiplayer, it's completely free to play. You don't even need Game Pass. So that won't show up at all on a chart. And then if you play campaign and you're a Game Pass subscriber, you can just do that, right? So it's selling less than Battlefield or Call of Duty, 100% expected. I will say it does seem that the campaign, despite all of this, is having pretty decent sales. Yeah. I've said all along that I didn't expect Halo Infinite to set any sorts of records for sales. I never expected it to be able to come close to matching games like Halo 3 or Halo 4 in sales. But it does seem that it's doing pretty decent in raw units. So I would say top 10 for December, I think, is actually a lock. Yeah, I do think it'll hit top 10 in December. I don't expect it to be number 1. I don't expect it to be number 2. I don't even know if it hits top 3. But top 10, I would say, yeah, should be a lock. I'd be very surprised if it missed top 10, which is going to be a good result considering this game's going to monetize in a completely different way than any prior Halo game. Like, Microsoft's main goal is to sell a ton of battle passes and to get a ton of Game Pass subscribers from it. Will they be happy with people buying the game for $60? Absolutely. They're not going to say no to that. But the main drive is selling those battle passes like Apex and Fortnite do and getting people to subscribe to Game Pass to play that campaign. So, but it does seem to be doing well in spite of all that. Yeah, I'd agree. Should be top 10, yeah. Yeah, this isn't accurate. VFX, what are your thoughts on Halo Infinite Steam charts numbers? It seems to be dropping 10K players every day, or every other day. Is this alarming for a free-to-play and first-time on day-and-date PC? Not at all. Like I said, people focus so much, and I don't understand it. And I'm not saying this in a mean way, VFX, but like these sorts of articles get so much traction online and stuff. This game has lost this many players since launch. This is true of nearly every game that has ever been released for all time. Multiplayer or single player. Almost zero games hold their peak. That's what makes things like Apex and Fortnite so incredible, and Call of Duty, right? The thing that makes these games such shocking successes is they can keep these enormous player counts for so long. Most games, almost every game that will be released, even multiplayer heavy games, look at Battlefield, I could go down the list, look at Back 4 Blood, look at the vast majority of games released. They lose tons of players. It is so hard to keep the amount of interest that you generate at launch long term. Now, the goal for Halo needs a healthy long-term player base. That's the main thing for them. It's not hitting 300,000, close to 300,000 concurrent players every day. If that happened, it would be incredible. But put it this way, if they were able to keep close to their peak, let's say 250,000 players per day, not only would that make that a giant success, we're talking this would be the type of game that would be up there only below games like Counter-Strike and Dota. Like, there's no chance that Halo on Steam is going to come anywhere near Counter-Strike and Dota, right? So if it was hitting that every single day, it'd be up there with those and like PUBG. That's just not going to happen. Halo needs to have a healthy long-term player base. I've always said if they can say close to 100,000, give or take a little bit, right? That could come down some. But if they can keep around there, anywhere 80,000, 70,000, around that ballpark. If you look at other big shooters like Destiny, that's usually around what they're doing. Destiny is one of the most successful free-to-play, because it is free-to-play outside of expansions, shooters on the market. And that's around what it's doing. Like, let's look. What's Destiny 2's peak right now? And again, I don't know that Halo's going to settle where Destiny 2 is. It could be way below it. I'm just saying, like, this is how you got to look at it. You can't look at it in terms of like, oh my God, Halo's not doing 270,000 players. What's happening? Like, let's look. Destiny, it's probably pretty high because they have a lot of content going on right now. Yeah, so there's 70,000 playing it, and their 24-hour peak's 81. So we're talking one of the most successful free-to-play shooters in the entire world right now. Their 24-hour peak is 81,000. So Halo needs to stay to be considered, like, I would say hugely successful right in that range, right? 70s, 80s, 90s, 100 would be great. That would put it in there with these games like Destiny. Now, if this thing goes down, I would say I would start to get I mean, if this goes down to like 30,000 players in like a couple weeks, that is alarming, right? That's alarming. If it goes down to like 30,000 players, holy crap, that's not good for a free-to-play shooter of this scale. That would concern me. What's Halo's 24-hour peak? Probably, I'm going to guess 80,000, right around the 80s. Yeah, 75. So if that keeps going down, I'd be alarmed. Yeah, I'd be alarmed if it keeps going down. But we'll have to see. Another issue for Halo is going to be that the season is so long. So that will actually get worrying too. Like, I bet you when we hit, because this season goes till when? This season goes till May, I think. I bet this is going to be really low in like March. Really low, because people will be like all done with the battle pass and just waiting for content. So I actually bet you this dips extremely low spring next year. I could easily see this hitting in the 20s and 30s then. But it should pick back up once they hit season 2. So I would say once they're back into their 3-month schedule, every 3 months or so, a new season, they need to be up there in those 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, hundreds, thousands everyday peaks. That will be successful. If by the time they hit season 2, they're only peaking at like 30 or 40,000, that'd be bad. That'd be bad. It just would be bad. Yeah, that would be bad. So, but I bet this gets pretty low. Yeah, I bet, listen, the 6-month thing for season 1 is a kind of wild choice. The main reason I think they're doing it is to give their teams rest, because they just made this ginormous game. But that player count's going to go low in the spring. Yeah, it's going to go low. So that's going to suck. They're going to have some poor numbers in the springtime. Okay. Let's see. We don't have too much time left. I'm going to only pull a few more questions, and then I got to go. We have a super chat here from Highlander, and then I'm going to hit like a couple more, and then we're out. Highlander001 with a 5. Phil Spencer said he wants to get at least one AAA game out every quarter. Is that too ambitious? Not at all. Easily doable with the amount of teams they have now. So that's actually going to be easy mode. They're going to actually be able to hit some quarters more than that. So keep in mind, Microsoft now has an enormous amount of studios. And the thing that kind of gets untold in a way is a lot of Microsoft's teams in particular are 2-team studios, tons of them. You see Obsidian making multiple games at the same time. We've got a Playground making multiple games now at the same time. I could go down the list. Ninja Theory has multiple games in development right now. We know that. They've announced them. Hellblade, Project Mara. We know the Coalition is currently a 2-game studio. They're working on some sort of new IP as well as the next Gears of War. Obviously, Gears of War 6 is in very early development. I would not expect that for several more years, but they are doing 2 games right now. So no, a game every quarter is actually going to become pretty easy. They're not going to have any issues hitting that. 2022 is still probably not going to quite get there, but 2023 and beyond, I don't think you'll ever see another year for Microsoft again. That doesn't happen. Barring something crazy like another pandemic or something. But now they just have enough teams. It's you just do the math, and it's kind of impossible to miss that. All right, Benji with a super chat. And I just got to take a couple more, and I got to go. Benji with a 5. Benji, there are rumors of a new Bully game. Why would Rockstar go for a Bully rather than Max Payne? Also, rumors Grand Theft Auto 6 development is being a mess. That wouldn't shock me if Grand Theft Auto 6 dev is a mess. I hope that's not true. I wouldn't be surprised. We see a lot of games, especially games that are as ambitious as something like Grand Theft Auto, hit development hell. In fact, it's like super common for giant games. Look at what happened with Halo Infinite, right? That had development hell. Now, in the end, the game turned out awesome, but it wasn't always the case. And that's like true of a lot of games. So would I be shocked if Grand Theft Auto 6's development's a mess? Not at all. Hopefully they can, if this is true, hopefully in the end they can pull it all together and pull it off. But I wouldn't be shocked at all, especially with how ambitious GTA 6 has got to be. I mean, that thing's got to be insanely. Look at Red Dead Redemption 2, like the last big game we got from Rockstar. The ambition on that thing was unbelievable. And 6 is only going to be more than that. So I can't even imagine. That's got to be insane. And then why Bully instead of Max Payne? I think there's just probably a lot of demand for Bully, and it's probably something that they can do more as an easier side project than Max Payne. Like, I feel like Max Payne would take a lot of effort and a lot of resources to have a really high-quality Max Payne game. Whereas Bully, it's a little bit smaller in scope, right? It's a little bit more fun, playful. You don't necessarily have to push it to the most insane AAA visual standards like a Max Payne, I feel like, would have to be. Like, I feel like a Max Payne game, you know, a linear, super narrative-focused game, you're going to push that super hard. I'd love to see it, but I just think Bully probably has more natural demand right now than the new Max Payne game. Max Payne 3 was kind of mixed with some people. I adored Max Payne 3, but some people felt pretty mixed on it, whereas there's been demand for a Bully sequel for, like, ever. So I just think it's probably an easier side project. And, like, in terms of, like, realistic shooter-type games, probably all those resources are going into Grand Theft Auto. Okay, I'm going to pull, like, 2 more questions, and I got to go. I'm going to end up missing more questions than I expected, but I got to go. I got to go. Ryan saying, hi, Benji, I like your shirt. Thank you so much, Ryan. Have to celebrate Spider-Man today. We're going to do some rapid fires here. Michael, if you had to bet, do you think Ragnarok will make 2022 or will it get delayed into 2023? I think it will make 2022, Michael. I had said that what I had heard even before this game was publicly delayed, what I had heard prior to that behind the scenes was that this game could be a summer game. I still am sticking with that. I would love to see it sooner, Michael. The rumblings, this was a long time ago that I heard this. Like I said, even prior to the official delay, was it could go back to summer. I have no idea if that's still the plan, but it wouldn't shock me if this is June, a similar time slot that The Last of Us has seen huge success in, or even maybe a July. We saw Ghost of Tsushima have huge success in July as well. So right now, I'm guessing, and this is not a lock, but from some of the rumblings, I'm guessing this game is summer, Michael. I'm guessing it's summer 2022. Plastic Arts, have not seen Power On yet. I need to watch it. I heard it's great. So I'm trying to rapid fire. Benji, could the shortages affect the PS5 sales potential long term? Could we have PS1-like sales rather than PS4? No, I don't think so. Potentially in Japan, because the sales are so catastrophically bad. You know, it's not like the US and Europe where they're still getting pretty good chunks of consoles. I mean, it's selling like 1,000 a week in Japan. That's bad. So maybe Japan, but in the West, no. The demand's just too high. All this is going to do is extend the generation. So will PS5, its peak might come much later than it did for PS4. But I don't think it's going to hurt the total sales, like at the very end of the generation. I just think this generation lasts longer, and it might peak later. But I don't think so, because I think these consoles will be around for at least 8 years. I really do. I think it's going to be a long generation because of the pandemic. Michael, were you surprised or not that Forza was able to crack top 5 for November? Not at all. That was my prediction. My predictions for this NPD were spot on. Spot on. Someone asked me to do software a few chats ago, and I had said Call of Duty, Battlefield, Pokemon, and Forza in the top 5 with Madden. Boom, it happened. And then last chat, I had said Switch number 1, and there was a good chance Xbox would outsell PlayStation. Boom, it happened. I'm pretty good at predictions, y'all. Pretty good. I'm not perfect, but I'm pretty good. Sorry, I just got to hit a couple more. Couple more. And I got to go. I'm trying to make them rapid fire so I can hit several. Randy, we know Zenimax Online has been working on a new unannounced game. Yeah, and it's a new IP. For 4 years, and the director is Ben Jones. When will it get announced? Possibly next year. I don't know that for sure, but possibly. Possibly. And there's also talent from Sony that have gone over to Zenimax Online to work on that game. There are people from Sony that have gone over there too. Maybe next year, maybe, but it's probably going to be another giant ambitious online game, possibly even an MMO, so that could take some time. Could take some time. Those kinds of games take forever. So maybe next year. Maybe. But I wouldn't say it's a lot. Could even be the year after. One or two more, and I gotta go. Okay. I'm about to go. I'm going to grab two more. Sorry. Two more and I'm out. Oh, Jason here with a super kind comment. Jason, let me make sure I get to your question. If you don't have, let me see. Let me look through the chat. Jason, I am a new subscriber. I am a huge fan. Well, thank you, Jason. That's incredibly kind. I sadly came late to the chat, so I don't think my question will be answered, but I understand that hopefully I will next week. Jason, did you already ask it? Because I will get to your question, Jason. That's incredibly kind. Oh, Jason actually asked a very similar question. Speaking of game development, isn't 5 to 6 years to develop games a bit too much? Don't you think consumers and developers deserve a shorter time span than waiting that long for them? Jason, we talked about this a little bit earlier. I do agree it's too much. We talked about how I think demand for support studios is only going to increase as these projects get so ambitious and they need more talent to help them get these games out quicker. So I agree. I think 5 to 6 years is too long for a lot of games. Not all of them. Something like a Grand Theft Auto, I would say you can kind of wait on because GTA Online carries it for so long. But like, should we only get, 1 or 2 games per generation from a first party Sony or Microsoft team? I think that is too long. I think you need to be trying to get, instead of 1 to 2 games per studio, you need to be trying to get 2 to 3 per generation from studios. So I agree. I think it's too long. And I think stuff like Unreal Engine 5 with Nanite, hopefully, and support studios becoming so in demand, hopefully those things help alleviate it. But it's not a guarantee. All right, one more and I'm out. Highlander, this isn't going to count, but it's another just super nice comment. You guys are so nice. Benji has the best fans and almost no console war BS. Thanks, mods. Well, one thing that helps that, Highlander, is I'm not a big YouTube channel. On my Twitter, which is way bigger, there tends to get into a lot of console wars in the comments. One advantage of my channel, and I agree with you, I do have the best, I don't like to think of you guys as fans, because, I interact with you, I feel like I know most of you. I haven't even met most of you, and I feel like I know you guys, right? Because we talk every single week for an hour and a half. So you guys are the best, and we get great questions, great discussion, and a big part of that is because my channel's not that big, right? Only 3,000 subscribers. I'm super thankful for that. But compared to a giant YouTube channel, once they get into the 100s, 200s, and even some of them got a million. But even I would say the people that have 100,000, as those numbers go up, I still think you keep the same proportion of great, nice people, but as that number goes up, you're also naturally just going to get more bad players. And I can definitely tell you, I've seen that in my Twitter. I still love a ton of my Twitter followers, but there's no doubt the bigger that gets, the more I have to deal with the crazy console wars popping off in the comments. One nice advantage of my YouTube kind of staying small, I'd love to see this YouTube channel get up to closer to my Twitter and followers. I'd love it. I just don't think it'll ever happen. But one advantage, we get to have some nice, really cool conversations without much drama and battling. So yeah, that is one of the nice side effects. And you guys rock. All right, one more, because that's not going to count as a question. One more, and we're out. I'd say this is closer. We're going to end here with Zilton. I forgot to ask, but what about Amazon's New World? It had a really big start, but it seems it rather slowed down. Seeing it how it's one of MMOs you have to buy, is that concerning news for it? I would say that is more concerning than Halo, because let's look at this drop, because this is pretty severe. Because right now, Halo's peaking at about per day, and it's free to play, right? You don't have to pay for it. So obviously you're going to get a lot of players that maybe aren't long-term interested in the game trying it, right? They just kind of mess with it for maybe a week and drop it because they're not paying anything. It's free, so you can install it. But it's still peaking about, around-ish 30% of its all-time peak. Let's look at New World, which is an MMO, which is really all about having a giant amount of players, right? This, I would say, is a little more worrying. So, New World, it's still doing a lot. I mean, it's still over 100K, dude. So that's still really good, but here is the thing that's a little more alarming. New World you have to pay for, and its all-time peak is outstanding. It did almost 1 million, 913,000 players, but it has dropped. Its 24-hour peak is 118. So it's closer to 10% of its all-time peak. Now, not quite, but right, it's pretty close. Pretty close to 10% of its all-time peak. And that's a game you have to pay for. I would say between that and Halo, which is the more alarming drop, I would say New World. However, it's still a pretty high player count. I mean, 100,000... Any game that can hit 100,000 concurrent players every day, I mean, that still is pretty freaking good. So, is it a little bit dang, this game couldn't come close to holding what it did, right? Down to about 10% of its all-time peak. That's not an amazing sign. But 100,000, it's hard to be too upset with 100,000 concurrent every day. That's concurrent, so that means total players. It's still hitting multiple hundreds of thousands of daily players. Hard to be mad at that. But, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it plays out. All right, I got to end it there. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for an awesome chat. Thanks for the super chats and the support. Thanks for all of the kindness that you guys treat me with every single week. It's amazing. If you don't follow me on Twitter already, odds are 99% that you do, but follow me on Twitter if you don't. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're not. We do one of these chats every single week. We'll be back next week. I'm not sure on the day. My days are kind of random because I work retail, so my schedule is never set. It's different every single week. But we will be back next week, and I will let you guys know when. So subscribe to the YouTube. Follow me on Twitter. Stay safe. Play some games. And I will see you either on Twitter here really soon, or I will see you next week here on YouTube. Have a great day, everyone. Have a great night, and I will